Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive, tight end hand size. The theory seems solid on the surface.
Yeah.
Bigger hands, better grip, more reliable catches, right?
Yeah.
Should mean more fantasy points. But does that intuition actually, hold up when you look at the data? We dug into over 20 years of it.
Yeah, that was the mission. We took over 2 decades of fantasy results, specifically PPR scoring, comparing the real studs, the top 10 finishers, against those guys kind of hanging on, the low-end starters, 41st to 50th place. Let's call them the bottom 10.
Yeah.
And the big question was, okay, does the data actually back up this bigger hands are better idea? Let's unpack it.
Right. And spoiler alert. The moment we looked at the numbers, that whole intuitive theory just kind of evaporated. We found pretty much nothing. No correlation. Actually, it was almost the opposite sometimes.
Exactly. If bigger hands were key, you'd expect the elite guys to consistently have them. But no, we found that in 12 of the 21 seasons we looked at, that's, 57%? The top 5 fantasy TEs actually average smaller hands. And when we sliced the elite finishers into tiny hand size groups, the success was it was all over the place. No pattern, totally spread out.
Okay, but you know us.
Yeah.
We kept digging, so we compared the top 10 appearance rates versus the bottom 10 rates for every single hand size. Was there any threshold that actually stood out?
There was one, eventually. The only range that showed a consistently positive difference was 10.5 inches and bigger. Guys in that specific bucket, 10.5 plus, they showed up in the top 10 about 11.7% more often compared to showing up in the bottom 10. So a tiny sliver.
Okay, wait a sec. 11.7%. That sounds like an edge, doesn't it? If you're making a tough call in a draft, maybe that's enough. Why get bogged down in, heavy stats?
Yeah. But that's where the statistical reality check comes in, and it's really, really important here. We have to talk about the Pearson value. We calculated it for hand size versus fantasy production, and for anyone listening who isn't deep into stats, the Pearson correlation is just a number, right? Between -1 and 1, it tells you how strongly 2 things are linked in a straight line.
Okay, got it. So what was the Pearson number for tight end hand size and fantasy points?
A whopping 0.04, barely above 0. It shows an extremely weak positive relationship, almost negligible. Generally, for scouting world-class athletes, you'd want to see a Pearson value over 0.1 for a measurable to be considered statistically significant. Hand size isn't even in the same ballpark.
Right. And to really hammer home how small 0.04 is, let's give some context. We looked at quarterback draft capital in another analysis, something everyone agrees matters.
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance, and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
That had a Pearson value of negative 0.219. Now it's negative, but the strength of that relationship is way, way stronger, 5 times stronger than what we see with TE hand size.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing to pour some cold water on that 10.5-inch finding, even that small edge we saw. It's actually been decreasing in the most recent decades. So whatever minimal predictive value it might have had, it seems to be fading.
Okay, so let's bring it all together. What's the final verdict for you listening? After looking at 20 years of data, a tight end's hand size, it really has pretty much 0 predictive value for fantasy football success. The numbers are clear on that.
Absolutely. Let's be real. If you're absolutely stuck between 2 players, final pick, agonizing, and you insist on using it as a tiebreaker, the only, and I mean only, very weak signal in the data points towards favoring the guy with 10.5-inch hands or bigger. Think of it as maybe a psychological comfort blanket, not actual science.
Yeah, it's fascinating, though, isn't it, how much we want that number to matter. even when we know it's statistically insignificant. We crave that little edge.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? When we're evaluating athletes, at what point does something statistically meaningless, like that 10.5-inch threshold, at what point does it become psychologically meaningful for the analyst, the person who actually has to pull the trigger on that draft pick? Something for you to chew on next time you're staring at those combine numbers.